In this video, guys, I'm going to show you how to cut and sew this style. Okay, so this is the front part of this gown, and it doesn't have the half cut. It doesn't have a joining in the middle, and for the back as well, it doesn't have the half cut, and it also doesn't have a dart at the back. Okay, so I'm starting with the front part, and this is the paper I'm going to use to show you how to cut this gown. Okay, so now first thing I went ahead to do was to fold it. After folding it, I went ahead to draw my bust point line, my nipple point line, my under bust point line, my half blouse, and my hip point line. Remember, our bust point line is standard 8 inches from the top. Okay, so now the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my chest point. So me, I always like to take 6 inches from the top. So I'll be calling the actual measurements I would have called if I was marking on my fabric directly. So I'm going to be calling my measurements in inches. Okay, so now from the top I came down by 6 inches and I marked my chest point. Okay, after doing that, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my shoulder point. So you're going to mark your shoulder divided by 2. You're going to mark it. So my own shoulder is 17, so divided by 2, that is 8.5. so I'm going to go ahead to mark 8.5. so I marked 8.5 at the top and also at my bust point line. The next thing I went ahead to do, because our shoulders are not straight, you're going to step that point down by half an inch, and the distance between the top and my bust point, I'm going to mark the half point, and I'm going to come in by half an inch. For my neck width, I went ahead to mark 4.5 inches for my neck width. You can do 4 inches, you can do 5 inches, but me, I worked with 4.5 inches for my neck width. So now after doing that, I just went ahead to slant my shoulder line. Okay, so after slanting my shoulder line, the next thing I went ahead to do was to connect that point to my shoulder point. Okay, so now at my bust point, I went ahead to mark circumference of my bust divided by 4, and I marked it there. Okay, so now after marking it, the next thing I went ahead to do was to insert my armhole curve. You guys know this thing, and you people have seen me do it over and over again here on this channel. So I just went ahead to insert my armhole curve. Okay, so now after inserting my armhole curve, the next thing I went ahead to do was at my under bust point, I marked circumference of my under bust divided by 4. For me, it is 8 inches. Okay, so now after marking 8 inches, at my half blouse point, I marked circumference of my waist divided by 4. For me, it is 8 inches because my waist and my under bust point is 32 inches. Okay, so now at my hip point, I'm going to mark circumference of my hips divided by 4 plus 1.5 inch. Okay, so whatever you mark at the hip, when you get to the hem, you're going to add 3 inches to it. So it will give us this flare A-line shape. Okay, so now after doing all this, I just went ahead to connect all my markings together. Now for the flare, you can make it curvy, you can make it A shape, whatever you want. I think for this tutorial, I stuck to making it A shape, but you can make your own curvy. Okay, not just like A-line. Okay, so now after doing this, the next thing I went ahead to do was at the hem, I came up by 1 inch. You can do 2 inches. Okay, I came up by 1 inch and I just curved it in. 2 inches works very well. Okay, so now after doing this, at my nipple point, the next thing I went ahead to do was to mark my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2. Okay, so my nipple to nipple measurement divided by 2 is 4 inches, so I marked 4 inches point. Okay, so now after marking 4 inches, by the side, I came down by 1 inch. What I want to do now is mark out my breast dart. Okay, I came down by 1 inch. Now after coming down by 1 inch, the next thing I went ahead to do, from that my nipple point, I'm going to mark 1 inch away from it. Okay, so I just marked 1 inch away from it. Then I'm going to connect that point now to the side. Okay, this is how you insert your breast dart. Okay, if you are still very confused, join my beginner class. Now after doing this, the next thing I went ahead to do is from that my shoulder line, I went ahead to mark 2 inches. Okay, so from that 2 inch mark, I connected it to my neck width point. So this is how simple and easy it is to cut the front part of this gown. Remember, when you're marking out your measurement, to add your sewing allowance and all those things. Okay, so now after marking the front part, this is what we have here, ladies and gentlemen. Very simple, very straightforward, no plenty talk. So to make this more visually appealing to you, you know that top part is going to be chantilly lace. So I just went ahead to shade it with my red marker. Then I went ahead to cut it out. Okay, so now you're just going to take your time to cut it out. Remember, there are places that you're meant to cut out, like this place I'm cutting now. you don't need it, so remember to cut it out. Okay, not the whole thing, like this other part that is in red, you need it. So now this breast dart, when you are sewing, you're just going to pick it and sew. Okay, so that's why I'm shading it. So this is what the front part looks like. Very simple, very straightforward. There's no plenty. Remember, it doesn't have a joining in the front, but if you want to put joining in the front, at that you'll have blouse point, you're going to cut it there. Okay, now it's time for the back part. So now for the back part, just like we did for the front part, we're starting with our fabric on a fold, even though I'm working with a paper. So the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark out 1 inch for my zip allowance. Okay, so I went ahead to mark out 1 inch on my zip allowance. Remember, I'm calling these measurements as if I'm cutting on my fabric, so it makes more sense to you guys. Then I went ahead to target zip allowance, but we need to fold the zip allowance, so just keep it out of sight. We are going to come back to unfold it later. Okay, so now, just like we did for the front, I went ahead to insert my bust point line, my nipple point line, my under bust point line, my half blouse line, and my hip line. Okay, so the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark my shoulder point. So my shoulders divided by 2, that is 8.5 inches. So I'm just going to mark 8.5 inches. And what I'm doing here is I'm trying to insert my armhole curve. Remember, our armhole is not straight, it is curvy. Okay, so I took my neck width at 4.5 inches, just like I did for the front. Okay, so now after taking my neck width at 4.5 inches, I just went ahead to slant my shoulder line by 1/2 inch. Remember, our shoulder lines are not straight. Okay, then I also went ahead to I marked circumference of my bust divided by 4, and that is 9.5 inches. And I just went ahead to curve in my armhole curve. Okay, so after going ahead to curve in my armhole curve, the next thing I went ahead to do now, so this is my armhole curve here. So the next thing I went ahead to do now was, from that my shoulder line, I marked 2 inches and I just connected it to my neck width. Okay, so from that my shoulder point, I marked 2 inches and I connected it to my neck width. Understand? Yeah. So now at my under bust point, I marked circumference of my under bust divided by 4. Mine is 8 inches. Okay, and at my half blouse, I mark circumference of my waist divided by 4, and that is 8 inches. So for my hips, I mark circumference of my hips divided by 4 plus 1.5 inch. Okay, so now at the hem, whatever you marked at your hip, add 3 inches to the hem. If you want it a little bit more flared, make it 4 or 5 inches. Okay, so after doing all this, I just went ahead to connect all my markings together. Okay, so now after connecting all my markings together, I went ahead to unfold the zip allowance. So this is what we have here for the zip allowance. So if you look at this style, you see that it doesn't have a joining. It doesn't have a dart and a joining in the back. So we need to contour the zip allowance. So between my under bust point and my half blouse, okay, we're going to look for the middle. Okay, and we're just going to draw a straight line, which is what I did here. So the middle between my under bust point and my half blouse, I drew a straight line. So now after drawing a straight line, what I went ahead to do is, from that my zip allowance line, I went in by 1 inch. You can go in by 0.7 inch if you don't want it so curvy, or 0.6. You can also go in by 0.7. You can do 1 inch if you want, depending on how much you want to contour the zip allowance, so that it will relax well on the back. Remember, it doesn't have a dart and it is not a stretchy fabric. Okay, so now from that 1 inch line, I just went ahead to marry the line back into my original zip allowance line. Okay, I went ahead to marry the line back into my original zip allowance line. You can see how I'm slanting it in. That is how you are going to slant your own in, ladies and gentlemen. Make sure that you contour it a little bit, because like I said, it doesn't have a dart, and this is a structured fabric. Okay, and it's a structured style. Okay, so now this is what we have here. This is our new zip allowance line. So now, as this is our new zip allowance line, we're going to take our measurement all over again from this new zip allowance line. So from this new zip allowance line, I went ahead to mark my new bust measurement, like my bust measurement at 9.5 inches, my under bust measurement at 8 inches, circumference of my waist at 8 inches. Okay, I also marked circumference of my waist, circumference of my waist, circumference of my under bust point, right, at my hips. I just went ahead to take my measurements all over again, you get, because we've adjusted the zip allowance line and we need our measurement to be accurate. So now this, and of course you want to make sure that you marry it to your initial line in the places that you didn't do so much adjustment, okay? So which is what I did here. So now that line is no longer needed, so this line is a new line with our measurement. So I just went ahead to get rid of that initial measurement line. And the next thing I went ahead to do, remember that we took 1 inch for our zip allowance. So I'm just going back to reshape that zip allowance line back to 1 inch so that everything is accurate. Do you understand? Remember that when we adjusted the zip allowance line, of course we tampered with the width of the zip allowance. So I'm just going ahead to mark it back to 1 inch. Okay, so now after shaping it back to 1 inch, I just went ahead to connect all my points together. Okay, so I went ahead to connect all my points together. After connecting all my points together, that part, is no longer part of the zip allowance now, so we are going to get rid of it by cutting it out and throwing it away. So I'm shading it so it doesn't confuse you. Okay, so now that is the part we are getting rid of. It's no longer part of the zip allowance. At the hem, I came up by 1 inch. You can do 2 inches. Okay, and I just connected it into the hemline. Now after doing this, you just want to make sure that you extend that to your bust point line, because we are going to get rid of some of those parts of the upper part. Okay, so now this is what we have here for the back. I know it looks a little bit confusing. Stay with me, like they stay on TikTok. Walk with me, Abi. And so they tell the talker. Okay, so now this is what we have here for the back part, and you know that this top part is going to be in chantilly lace. So I just went ahead to shade it so it makes more visual sense to you guys. Then I went ahead to cut it. Remember to add sewing allowance when you are cutting your style. So now the next thing I went ahead to do was to cut it at the zip allowance, cut it at the hem, cut that part that we did not need. Okay, and I folded the zip allowance back so it makes more sense to you guys. So now this is what the back part looks like. Is it not giving? I went ahead to open up the zip allowance so that you know that, okay, this is a zip allowance. You can see how it shaped the back a little bit because there is no dart. It has already taken shape the dart, shape the zip allowance so it will rest properly on the back part. Okay, so now this is what the back part looks like. You can go ahead and cut your desired length of strap that you would connect to the back part. Okay, whatever length you want, you cut it. So I just cut another paper, and that's what we have there. Now for the sleeve, this is my upper arm point, which is 5 inches from the top. This is my elbow point, and from the top to the bottom, that is my sleeve length. Okay, so now the first thing I went ahead to do was to mark at my upper arm point. I marked circumference of my upper arm divided by 2. That is what I marked there. Okay, now if you don't know how to cut a basic sleeve, because this is a basic sleeve, I have 3 detailed tutorial on this channel on how to cut a basic sleeve. Check the link in the description box or comment section. At my elbow point, I mark circumference of my elbow divided by 2. At the sleeve length, I marked circumference of my wrist divided by 2. Now after doing this, the next thing I went ahead to do was to insert my sleeve curve. Okay, this is a basic sleeve. I went ahead to insert my sleeve curve before I bite my tongue. Like I said, I have detailed tutorials on my YouTube channel, so you need to check it out. Okay, so now I just went ahead to connect my upper arm point to my elbow point and now to my wrist. But if you look at the sleeve of this dress very well, it is not exactly straight. It's a little bit A-line or curvy, a little bit A-line around the wrist. So I just went ahead to extend it a bit. So you can extend it by 1.5 inch or 2 inches. So the A-line is very visible. You can do 2 inches. So now after extending it, and we have like a little bit A-line situation going on there, I went ahead to cut it, and this is what we have here, ladies and gentlemen. Okay, so now this is what the sleeve looks like. You can see it's already giving A-line, basic sleeve, A-line. Okay, so now this is what the back part looks like with the sleeve. I went ahead to shade it in red so it makes more sense to you guys. So this is what the back part looks like. Is it not giving? It is giving. Now this is what the front part looks like. Let me know if you are going to try it out. Okay,